If you've had enough as much as us, why are you still enforcing it, boys?
You have to.
No, we know you don't have to.
This is what, listen, we're not here to argue with you unless go home. Otherwise, they start issuing tickets.
Bro.
We don't want to do it, but we will do it, right?
Well, if you don't want to do it, don't do it. Stand up for what you believe in rather than paycheck.
Just go home, all right? We get paid to do this, mate. I'm just as over this fucking protest as you are. By protest, I mean lockdown, all right?
Fair enough,
unfortunately,
fair enough.
I've got to do what I've got to do. And
You
that's why I'm
don't
here
have
trying
to do
talk
that.
to you.
You don't have to do that. You're choosing to do it for
I'm not
paycheck.
skilled to do anything else, mate. So unfortunately,
Mate,
at this time of my life, that's what I have to
and
do.
the people of us that aren't skilled, we don't get paid. We're not getting food at the moment.
I hear you, mate. My wife's in the same position. She's out of a job at the moment as well. I understand you're being pissed off about it, but there's a way to go about it, that's all. And unfortunately, punching on with coppers isn't it, mate.
I respect that. If you feel like you got guns.
Look, at the end of the day, I agree with you.
Then why are you standing on this side and not with us?
Because that's what I get paid to do.
So you agree with me, but you get paid to do that, so you stand on that side.
Why I'm trying to talk to you the way I'm talking to you, as opposed
Exactly,
to...
because it's not, you're doing what you're getting paid to do, not what you stand in, and that's why I disrespect you.
That's fine, and I'm still asking you to go home, please.
Yeah, get your paycheck so you and your wife can eat. We won't, but you can eat, so...
We're not going home, we're talking?
I know, hey, we're not going home, we're not listening to your orders anymore.
I'm just letting you know, we come back again, you're all going to be arrested.
Yeah, that's fine, mate. We don't, if you can't tell, we're not afraid anymore.
If you're being required to do things that make you weak and ashamed, then stop. Don't do them. Like one of the things I learned from Solzhenitsyn and Frankl was that systems go terribly out of control when people don't stop them when they're going mildly out of control. You know, and you might say, oh, I should just keep my goddamn head down and shut up. It's like, maybe you should. Like, that's not bad advice. You know, you don't want to make unnecessary enemies, and you don't need any more trouble than you need. But you got to ask yourself on a day-to-day basis, what makes you think you're not selling your soul? You know, and there's so much foolishness going on in the mid-level bureaucratic world now. That's where all the tyranny seems to be focused. And the reason that it multiplies is because sensible people say nothing when they should say something. And what's so strange about that is that there are way more sensible people than people who aren't sensible. They're just not as noisy. So what you'll turn out if, like, you know, so let's say something's bugging the hell out of you at work. Well, then you have to prepare to find another job. That's the first thing you have to do. I don't think that you should find another job, but you should prepare to find another job. And if possible, you should prepare to find a better job. Because if you can't tell someone to go to hell, then you can't negotiate with them. And if they've got you over a barrel, then you can't say anything. So you got to set yourself up so you've got some mobility. And actually, that's a really good principle in your life, period. You should set yourself up so that you have a lateral move at hand. You got to ask yourself when you go and do what you do, like, is this making you stronger? Is this making you weaker? And if it's making you weaker, then you got to ask yourself, do you really want to be weaker? Because the weaker you get, the more you're tyrannized. And then worse than that, like the weaker you get, the more bitter you get. And the more you'll work towards terrible things, the more you'll snap at your wife, the more you'll kick your kids, you know. Like, it's no joke to be tyrannized at work. And so I would say you have an ethical responsibility as a citizen to forthrightly confront creeping tyranny no matter where it occurs. And part of what we're learning, I would say, from these stories, if we're learning anything at all, is that if you're aimed at the good, which is a question you really got to ask yourself, you know. If you're genuinely aimed at the good, then take heart, because you're a lot stronger than you think. If you get your words right, and you have something to say, there'll be an impact of those words. It might not be the impact that you would choose. But the other thing you got to tell people is, pick your poison. You may be in a situation where you don't have a cakewalk to the Garden of Paradise. You got tyranny or famine. Those are your choices. But you get to pick which one you have. And I would say if you're being oppressed, and I mean in your soul, by what you're required to swallow at work, well, you think you're not paying a price for that? You got no self-respect, and rightly so. But worse than that, You're an agent of your own destruction. You're destroying your own ideal, and you're letting people who are weak and corrupt win. And if you stood up and stood up properly, but you have to put yourself in order to do this, at least to some degree, right? You can't do it casually. You have to do it from some position of preparedness and strength. Then what makes you think you couldn't scare them back into the corners? And that would be a good thing. And, you know, the alternative, personally, is bad because there's a psychological degeneration that goes along with it. I've seen this with many, many of the people that I've worked with who have been tyrannized in the workplace to the absolute detriment of their psychological and physical health, right? To the point of collapse, confronting these crazy, crazy things when they were sensible people. That's a terrible price to pay, man. Like, it's a bad price. And then, if the foolishness isn't dealt with at the local level, when it's still relatively trivial, then it will multiply until it's dealt with at the social level. And we're seeing signs of that already. Antifa is a good sign of that. You know, and problems that aren't solved multiply, and soon people fight. And you know, better to argue than to fight, unless you want to fight. And some people want to fight, and I can understand why, but I wouldn't recommend it, because that doesn't lead good places. It really doesn't lead good places. So I'd say you have a duty. Maybe that's why you stand up. It's because you have a goddamn duty to stand up and just say what you have to say. You don't even have to be trying to make a point exactly or trying to get something done. It's like, this is how it looks to me. That's what you need to say what you think, because that's where you come from. Right? And if you don't say what you think, then you kill your unborn self. That's what you do. That's what Cain did when he killed Abel. And that's why his punishment was unbearable. You know, you have things in you that are struggling to come to the light. That's the truth you need to utter. And you need to utter that truth, because without that truth, you cannot live in the world. Because the world's real, and you need truth to live in the world. And if you stifle your truth, well, how can that be anything but something that brings about hell? How could it be any other way? So you think, well, why should you speak up? That's easy, because the consequences of not speaking up, although delayed, are far worse. That's the reason. That's the reason. If it can't be courage, it could at least be prudence. So